the editor and publisher of the Des Moines Register, wonderful man named Rick Green, was speaking at an award ceremony where I was one of the individuals nominated for an award that the newspaper gave called the Iowa Star Award. And in speaking of me, he, in a facetious way, said that Ken Quinn is like the Forrest Gump of Iowa. That I sort of keep turning up at unexpected and unusual and very significant historic events or interesting events. The most famous, the most iconic, was being in the East Room when Richard Nixon gave his farewell speech as he was forced from office for the crimes he had committed and he was about to be impeached. And then riding in the elevator with Jerry Ford, Vice President Ford, about to be sworn in as president, being one of the very first people to speak to him and to walk with him, almost with him, into the White House to go to his swearing in. But my Forrest Gump moments started when I was 6 years old. My dad took me to Yankee Stadium on June the 13th, 1948. It was Babe Ruth Day. I saw Babe Ruth come out in his Yankee uniform, bring his bat, take a few swings. He was pretty rusty, being then in his 50s. But there in the house that Ruth built, Yankee Stadium, to see Babe Ruth himself in uniform, wow, what a moment. He'd be dead 6 months later of cancer. I was at the Peppermint Lounge on 45th Street in New York City in 1962 when the dance craze, the twist, was being introduced. And the house band was called Joey D and the Starlighters, playing in the Starlight Lounge, and their song was The Starlight Twist. So there I am on the dance floor doing this brand new dance craze as it was being introduced. 2 years later, 1964, I would have the occasion to get to be in the Cow Palace in San Francisco as the Republican National Convention takes place. And I see Barry Goldwater being nominated, the birth of the modern conservative political movement in the United States. And I was there. And 2 years after that, 1966, I'm at the most significant basketball game, college basketball game ever played. The NCAA National Championship game between all-white Kentucky, never recruited a black player to its team, against Texas Western. 5 African-American starters. And when Texas Western beats a top-ranked, everyone expected to win Kentucky Wildcats, it changes forever the face of college sports and the opportunities for African-American student athletes. And the game, which was played on the campus of the University of Maryland, where I was in graduate school, I got to send in my $6 and get a ticket. And I remember standing next to Joe Namath, the University of Alabama football star, later NFL football star, watching the game, watching history be made. 2 years later, 1968, I'm in Washington, D.C. for the most tumultuous year. of American politics ever since the Civil War. Robert Kennedy is assassinated. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. Lyndon Baines Johnson's driven from the presidency by protests over Vietnam, the protests which are so widespread, the hostility at the Democratic National Convention, the demonstrations in the streets, and I saw it all unfold. Washington, D.C. was burned by the riots in the aftermath of the King assassination. I saw all of this, lived through it, watched our country coming apart at the seams, and then went myself to Vietnam, into the middle of the Vietnam War. And then coming back, working at the White House, working on Henry Kissinger's National Security Council staff, being interpreter for the president in the White House in Vietnamese language, then being there at the fall of Saigon, desperately trying to get people evacuated so we can save some so they can live in freedom. When the Iran-Contra controversy starts, I'm in a position in the State Department where we are monitoring everything that happens, keeping track, getting records, so that now the FBI is coming to investigate me. And I have to give depositions and interviews, explain who knows what was going on, where were the illegal activities all taking place. This was as this Forrest Gump kind of moments stayed with me. I was part of the U.S.-China diplomatic relations being established, and Xi Jinping's father coming to Iowa, and I would take him around the state. And later, years later, in my exchanges with Xi Jinping himself, the president of China, I was able to make reference to being with his father, being part of that amazing legacy. I saw the moment when China's Big Bang began. I was in Guangdong province when the first experiment was done about introducing free market mechanisms that led to the unbelievable transformation of China economically. I wrote the first report on the Cambodian genocide, the worst genocide of the second half of the 20th century. And I was in Lebanon tracking down Yasser Arafat and PLO terrorists where they were hiding. And I traveled to Hanoi with John McCain, one of his very first trips back, so brave POW, stepping forward to help us account for other POWs. And then later being an essential part of the effort to destroy and eradicate the Khmer Rouge, the worst genocidal mass murderers of the second half of the 20th century. Being at Fenway Park with Norman Borlaug as we performed the exorcism to drive out the curse of the Bambino to allow the Red Sox to win the World Series. Being at the very first public event of Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton after he was elected governor of Arkansas at age 32. I was there as they began their journey, which would take him to the White House, her to be Secretary of State of the United States. and then being the first ever, only senior American ever invited to Iran to give a speech there, to endeavor to carry forward the legacy of peace through agriculture. All of these special moments, all of these, what Rick Green said, all of these Forrest Gump moments. How was I so lucky to sort of stumble into so many significant historic events and moments and be there and be part of them when they occur? I don't know that I know the answer to that. I just know how very, very grateful I am to have had the opportunity, unexpected opportunity, to be part of so much history, to witness so much history.